Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. So we're gonna have audio this week because my lights were taken for a science experiment. So just voice for now. Bear with me. I'm sure there's no loss there. So it was a relatively quiet weekend last weekend with only one sort of wide release last weekend, and that is the animation Playmobil the movie. And let's see how that movie did at the box office. Alright, so let's jump right in and let's start off with Playmobil the movie. Since this movie didn't open up in the top 10 at all, it ended up 14th with a 660K opening with a per theater average of only $282 per theater. Probably one of the lowest opening ever for a movie in wide release. Reviews wise, this movie is not that good. 24% on the tomato meter, and for an animation that is actually pretty poor. But a B plus cinema score though, but that's kind of average rating. But the 24%, that's a low review. Pretty much the critics didn't like this movie, and it's proved out by the box office. Only 660K for this movie. I thought it could open higher, like maybe 8 to 10 million, because it is aimed toward the young ones, children, but it didn't reach nowhere near that level. Playmobil is a brand of toys, sort of like Legos, blocky characters. For the younger kids, Lego could, the age range from, I don't know, 10 and up. Playmobil, preschool level, younger. And I thought, that this movie follows the playbook. The trailer for this movie is not terrible, right? It's just a stereotypical, spy thriller, except that, it has the Playmobil brand on it. It doesn't need to be the Playmobil brand. It just could be just some random animation spy thriller. They slapped the name on it, released it in theaters, and nobody really cared. It's possible this movie received relatively little advertising. They just, throw it out in theaters and hope for the best. I'm sure that's all you want to hear about Playmobil. Let's move on to the box office top 10. All right, let's start with the top movie of the week, and that is Frozen 2. It repeated in the top spot for the third weekend in a row. So in its third weekend, it dropped about 60% to pull in 34.7 million. Domestic growth so far is like 337 million, and let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 582 million for a worldwide total of 919 million. So it's nearing the 100 million mark, and I think it's going to surpass the first movie. The first movie pulled in 1.2 billion, by the way, and I think this movie is on track to surpass that. Alright, moving along to number 2 is Knives Out. This is the star-studded cast directed by Rian Johnson, starring Daniel Craig, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, Jamie Lee Curtis, and on and on and on. It's a quirky thriller, comedic thriller. Craig stars as a detective who is investigating the death of the patriarch of a quirky family. And let's see, in the second weekend, it dropped off about 47% to pull in 14.2 million for a domestic total of about 64 million. Open overseas already, pulled in an additional 60.6 million for a worldwide total of 124 million. The budget for this movie is 40 million, so it's doing pretty well worldwide. Alright, let's move on to number 3. It is the, a racing movie, Ford versus Ferrari, starring Matt Damon and Christian Bale. A well-reviewed movie, just like Knives Out. Knives Out had 96% on the tomato meter. Ford versus Ferrari had 92% on the tomato, A plus cinema score. And in its fourth weekend, it dropped about 50% to pull in about 6.5 million for a domestic total of about 91 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in an additional 76.5 million for a worldwide total of 167 million. Alright, let's move on to number 4, which is Queen and Slim. This is a surprise to me. This is a movie that I thought could probably open somewhere in about 5 million in 3 days, but it opened way better. It opened to about 11.9 million. And in its second weekend, it dropped about 45% to pull in 6.5 million, almost similar to Ford versus Ferrari. When the actual number comes in, it could possibly overtake Ford versus Ferrari for the third spot. All right, number 5 is the Mr. Rogers biopic, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. In its third weekend, it dropped about 56% to pull in 5.2 million. Domestic gross is about 43 million, and let's see, the budget for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is about 25 million, so it's nearing a break-even point. Let's see how this movie holds up during the rest of the December. Alright, number 6 moving along is Dark Waters. This movie expanded. It stars Mark Ruffalo as a corporate lawyer who takes on like DuPont, who's been poisoning the waters in a small town. Also in this movie is Anne Hathaway and Tim Robbins. It's well reviewed at 93% on the Tomato Meter, A- cinema score. In its third weekend, this movie pulled in about 4.1 million for a domestic total about 5.3 million. Overseas, it put in an additional 78k for, barely moved the needle for a worldwide total about 5.4 million. All right, number 7 is the thriller 21 Bridges, starring Chadwick Boseman. In its third weekend, it pulled in 2.9 million, a drop off of about 49% from the previous week, for a domestic total about 23.9 million. 21 Bridges is kind of a disappointment to me. I mean, since I said this movie could probably open somewhere in the 15 to 20 million range, but it actually opened to about 9.3 million. Overseas, they put in an additional 2.7 million for a worldwide total of 26.7 million. Alright, moving to number 8 is Playing with Fire, the comedy starring John Cena. In its fifth weekend, it pulled in about 2 million, drop off of about 53% for a domestic total about 42 million. Let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in an additional 7 million for a worldwide total about 49 million. Alright, number 9 is Midway, the Roland Emmerich directed World War II movie. In its fifth weekend, it pulled in about 1.9 million, a drop off about 51% from the previous weekend for a domestic total about 53 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in an additional about 55 million for a worldwide total of 108 million. The movie costs about 60 million to make, so still have a little way to go to break even. Alright, let's close out the top 10 with the Joker. In its 10th weekend, it pulled in about 1 million, a drop of about 47% for a domestic total of 332 million. And overseas, the figure is 723 million for a worldwide total of a little bit over 1 billion. Okay, that's it for the box office top 10. Let's move on to the new releases. We're going to have, I believe, 3 Y ones. The biggest of which is Jumanji, The Next Level, which is Jumanji 2, starring Dwayne Johnson. And then we're going to have the Black Christmas remake, as well as the Clint Eastwood directed Richard Jewell, a movie about the bombing in Atlanta during the Olympics. Okay, let's start off with Jumanji, The Next Level. So pretty much it's a sequel, as we know, to the Jumanji movie. And when the first Jumanji movie came out, rebooted, starring Dwayne Johnson, Jack Black, Kevin Hart, and Karen Gillan. We laughed at it, but it did really well. The first movie did really well. It opened to 36 million, went on to gross 404 million domestic, which is huge, right? I mean, you wouldn't expect this movie, this total, domestic total from a movie that opened to 36 million. And I went on to, gross nearly 1 billion at the worldwide box office, 962 million worldwide. 90 million budget. Now we're back with the sequel. I'm sure this the budget for the sequel is a bit higher since the first movie did so well. Let's see, it opened overseas already and it pulled in 53 million already. As for The Next Level, the title already described it. They're back for another adventure. They're back into the game. At a different location. The first movie took place in a jungle. This one took place in what looks like to be a desert landscape. So joining the cast is Danny DeVito, Awkwafina, Nick Jonas is still here, So it's pretty much an excuse to have a new adventure in a different setting with the Jumanji formula. Again, the first one did really well, nearly $1 billion at the worldwide box office on a budget of 90 million. There are no reviews for this movie yet. I'm sure it's going to be not as well reviewed as the first movie, since the first movie was done. And I guess the question is, do people want another Jumanji movie? Is there like is one enough, right? The first movie was released back in 2017. The good thing about a movie 2 years later is that they struck while the iron's hot. You don't want to wait too long between sequels. So that's the good thing about the sequel coming out in 2019. But the question is, are people asking for another one? Probably. I mean, since the movie opened so well, it went on, has legs. We thought it would drop, but during the Christmas season holidays, it continued to pull in numbers for domestic growth of for domestic total of 404 million domestically. So that's telling the producers that they like the first movie. People like the first movie, so they made another one to satisfy demand. But is this the one they are looking for? As I said, there are no reviews for the next level as of Monday. I'm sure the reviews will come in, and I'm pretty sure the reviews are going to be lower than the 76% on the tomato meter, since critics are hard to please. They've seen the first movie, and this is pretty much a sort of a retread, except in a different environment. But still, I think the movie's going to open better than the first movie. Is probably going to open somewhere in the 40 to 45 million range this weekend, because like I said, the first movie did so well, people liked it, and this is a known quantity for comfort food for those people looking for Dwayne Johnson special effects adventure, and this is it. All right, let's move on to Black Christmas. It's a remake of the 1974 slasher of the same name, about a group of sorority sisters who find that the college that they're in has some dark elements in it, demonic, satanic worshipping, I assume. It's directed by Sophia Takao, stars Imogen Poots, Lily Donahue, Elise Shannon, Brittany O'Grady, and others. Not a star-studded cast, right? People don't come to this movie for these actresses, right? It's a slasher movie. It's a horror movie opened during Christmas, holiday themed. Me and horror movies, right? I'm not a fan of horror movies. I can watch them, but I don't seek them out. So how will Black Christmas do? Again, it's hard for me to predict this movie, since I'm not the audience for this genre type of movies, right? But it could probably open somewhere in the 8 to 10 million range. I want to go lower, but I'm usually wrong with horror movies, and they usually do better than what I projected the movies to do. All right, finally we have the Clint Eastwood drama, Richard Jewell. Richard Jewell is the security guy who worked the the stands or the field, and he discovered a bomb. This takes place during 1996, the Atlanta Olympics, right? There was a bombing going on, and the people, the FBI, try to frame him, for this act. Has some really good actors in this movie: Sam Rockwell, Kathy Bates, John Hamm, Olivia Wilde, Paul Walter Hauser as the title character. And usually Eastwood movies tend to open well, with the exception of a couple. So far, this movie is well reviewed, 82% on the tomato meter. And like I said, Eastwood, his movies tend to open well. But I'm not sure about a movie about Richard Jewell, right? Who, is there a demand or people asking for a Richard Jewell movie? Maybe. But like I said, people who like Eastwood's movies would probably catch this movie regardless of what's it about, right? Since it's directed by Eastwood. So I think this movie could probably open somewhere in the 15 to 20 million range this weekend, but I won't be surprised if it opened higher. Like I said, Eastwood has his fans. But I'm going to go with 15 to 20 million for Richard Jewell. All right, that's it for this week's podcast. Tune in next time to see how I did. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.